Welcome to StabtheDragon. We're here tonight to do a whiskey review. Tonight we've got a Fort Worth product, Blackland Rye Whiskey. Blackland Distillery here in Fort Worth. See if I can get the lighting right there. I've got 10 points that I cover when I do whiskey reviews. I start with the history of the whiskey, the history of the distillery, anything that I can learn about the background to a whiskey. So Blackland Distillery is named for a geographic zone called the Blackland Prairie. It runs from the Red River through the Dallas-Fort Worth area down to San Antonio. And as the story goes, it was called Blackland because the grasslands would catch on fire in the long, dry, hot summers when a thunderstorm would cause a lightning strike. And then you've got a prairie fire. After the prairie fire, the land would be black with ash, which would actually nourish the ground so that the prairie would grow back even stronger. And sometimes Indians were known for setting fires for this very purpose. I love the fact that a distillery and whiskey are named for a geographical area with its own distinct ecosystem and history. Blackland is similar to Balcones in that respect. Balcones is from neighboring Waco and is named for an underground fault that runs through that part of Texas. Blackland Distillery is located just west of downtown Fort Worth. Founded in 2019 by Fort Worth native Marcus Kiprios, a local attorney and a graduate of the Culinary School of Fort Worth. His distiller is Ezra Cox, with over 20 years of experience in Washington State and here in Texas in brewing and distilling. There are a couple of unique things about Blackland Distillery. It uses a high-tech computerized system for distilling its spirits, and it uses an odd-sounding hybrid grain, Triticale, in its mash bill. The tasting room and bar at the distillery have an excellent reputation locally here in Fort Worth as a classy upscale place, but I have yet to visit. I just don't get out much. Triticale is a hybrid between wheat and rye. It gives the productivity of wheat, but the toughness, durability, higher protein of rye. Developed in the late 19th century in Scotland, it has made rapid strides in recent decades in viability and usefulness. Grown primarily in Europe, but now increasingly here in America. And the Triticale that's used in Blackland whiskeys is a North Texas grown product. This is a new distilling company with bold plans for the future. Fort Worth has been my home for over 35 years, and I'm looking forward to watching this brand grow. I'm going to give this history a 4 out of 5 points. Second category is marketing and packaging, with 5 points possible. I've not seen any advertisements or commercials for this whiskey. I've not seen any billboards, but that's not unusual. I rarely see things like that in the whiskey world. Once in a while, maybe, but not for Blackland. So on to the bottle and the labels. This bottle is a very nice decanter style. It's very attractive, clear glass, fluted, which has the side benefit of assisting in pouring and handling. The cork is rubber. The label looks initially like a simple, boring, cheap label in black and white, no frills, until you look at it more closely. When you look at it more closely, you see some finer details. You've got in a kind of an embossed circular pattern a design here that says Blackland Fort Worth, and it's got a sheaf of what I presume to be Triticale or some other type of grain in there more closely. You really can't see that on the camera, I don't think. And so that's actually pretty cool for a label. In black script, you've got some information about the whiskey. It says handmade in the Blackland Prairie. The Blackland Prairie runs from the Red River to the north down to San Antonio in the south. Lightning fires cleared the land for native tall grass to thrive in the rich, dark soil. And then, of course, the big, bold Blackland Rye Whiskey stands out. But you have to dig a little bit to see the other script. And then in tiny silver print, maybe, or gold, I can't really figure out what kind of color that is. It says Fort Worth, 41.5% alcohol by volume, 750 milliliters. And keep in mind that this is just a 2-year-old company, just getting started. A big, expensive label is not really called for at this point, but this smaller label is pretty nice once you start looking at it. The back label's got legal stuff and a barcode, but it also says, we use innovative distillation methods to produce remastered spirits for the modern drinker whose palate appreciates tradition but longs for tomorrow's taste. Blended and bottled by Blackland Distillery, 70% aged 2 years. There's a little bit of problem with the stuff on the back there. Most labels are going to include nice sounding gobbledygook on their labels to make their product sound awesome. Most of the time it's just a marketing strategy. Here though, there's a couple of things that caught my eye. They talk about the Blackland Prairie, explains their name, which I like. But on the back, that piece about innovative distillation methods does describe Blackland's use of technology. Now, remastered spirits, I don't know what that means. All this stuff is the exact same stuff that's on the back of the bourbon bottle, which I reviewed a week or two ago. So with the bourbon, remastered spirits means that they've sourced most of that whiskey. They used the locally grown Triticale, and then they sourced the rest of it to make the bourbon. So remastered, yeah, I figured that. But when I watched the video about the rye whiskey, it sounded like it was all native Texas product. And so I'm not sure what remastered spirits means. I don't know. But I'm real sure that this is a Texas grain to glass whiskey for the rye. It's not sourced like the bourbon. Now, for the modern drinker, that phrase describes both the distillery bar that I have yet to go to, but I've heard it's first class. Very appealing to the 30 and up crowd. And the whiskey from Fort Worth that is based on Triticale is like I said, grown here in Texas. So that's for the modern drinker. I think Triticale is kind of a modern grain, and it's going to appeal to the younger crowd. The real problem, though, with this label is it says 70% aged 2 years. I have no idea what that means, because if 80% of the whiskey is rye and 20% is Triticale, what's the 70% aged for 2 years? I don't know. That's unclear. The label then could be more clear, and I hope for a larger, nicer label in the future. I do like the decanter style of the bottle. However, I don't think the bottle and label really connect with the name, which harkens back to the days of Indians on the prairie hunting buffalo. Somehow the bottle and label, I think, need to better reflect what the name stands for. So when it comes to advertising and the bottle, I'm going to give this a marketing 3 out of 5 points. Composition. Here we're getting into some more important stuff. Composition, this is a rye whiskey with a modern twist that the owners tossed in, and that's that 20% Texas Triticale and then the 80% Texas rye. So this is a Texas whiskey according to the video that I watched. However, here's the other problem. I've had quite a few Texas whiskeys, and this does not taste like any other Texas whiskey. This tastes more like an MGP rye. There's no Texas funk in this whiskey, and there should be. This whiskey is a 41.5% alcohol by volume, or 83 proof. and so it's a pretty mild rye whiskey. So I'm just not. It leaves a little question in my head about, is this all Texas whiskey or is it not? I could not find any reviews in print or on video about this whiskey. So, you know, there's just not a whole lot of information out there about it. For composition, then, I'll give it an 11 out of 15 points. Physical appearance. Well, here it's a medium appearance in its color. It's a light to medium amber with the legs in the Glencairn glass are, you know, fairly light to medium. So all in all, it's a nice looking whiskey, and that decanter style bottle contributes to that. Really highlights the color of the whiskey, I think, in the proper lighting. So physical appearance, a 3 out of 5. Aroma, nosing, here is 10 points available. But even with my fairly useless nose, I can smell a little bit of the rye spice. And that's fairly common with rye whiskeys. But I was surprised at this because of the low proof. The lower the proof, seems like the less I'm able to smell. And my nose just is not very good at all for smelling whiskeys, apparently. But the fact that I can smell something, and I smell the rye spice, 8 out of 10 points. And now the all-important category of taste. This whiskey tastes like a solid rye from front to back. Mildly sweet. All rye spice all the time. Very little burn. Very smooth drink. The floral, spicy rye flavors do not disappoint. I mean, this, if you want to taste the rye spice, what a classic rye is going to be like, this is the deal right here. Now, unlike with the Blackland bourbon, I cannot taste the Triticale. The rye completely overwhelms it. With the Blackland bourbon, I could taste that Triticale. It was a different taste, and that's what excited me about that bourbon. Is you could tell there was something in there that's unlike other bourbons. Well, here with the Blackland rye, this is a traditional rye flavor that's really quite bold on that flavor. So it's very familiar to an MGP rye, I think. So it right down the middle of the plate. Okay, there's nothing weird about this. It's just straight rye. Now, for a Texas whiskey, there's no Texas funk in here, and I've talked about that before, so I'm not real sure what's going on there. But this is delicious. Without any hesitation, I can tell you that this rye is the real thing. It's wonderful. I prefer this to the bourbon, actually, which I tend to be a rye guy anyway. So for tasting points, I'm going to say 20 out of 25. Mouthfeel. This whiskey really does not have a lot of an oily presence. And again, it's so low proof. It doesn't pack much heat either. Sometimes that depends on how you drink it, where you place it in the mouth, how long you keep it in your mouth. But this is not something that's going to beat you down. If you're sensitive to the heat of whiskey, the alcohol burn, or if you're sensitive to rice peppery spice, this may be for you because it's not going to burn you. There's no real pepperiness to this. It's simply the rye flavor from start to finish, and it doesn't have much of a long finish either. In fact, it's a pretty thin whiskey, and so it doesn't have much of a lingering presence. Yeah, so this is not a scary rye whiskey at all. This would be a good beginner rye, I think. Um, and really, for me, I mean, I like the burn. Okay, so I like a higher proof whiskey, and this I think would probably do better at 86 proof, maybe even 90. But for mouthfeel, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 15 points. Now let's talk about price, value, and availability. Specs has this here in Fort Worth for $29.67. Total Wine, $26.99. Goody Goody, it's $32.99. Now, for that price, I think there's going to be better rye whiskeys. Um, Wild Turkey 101 rye is an example. But the other side of the story is this has got such a good rye flavor from start to finish. This is really pretty good. I'm on my second bottle of this rye in 2 years, so I really do like it. And plus, I enjoy supporting a local distillery. So hopefully, with time, this whiskey improves some, and the distillery expands its reach, and maybe the price value improves. I've read one news article from September of this year, 2021, that this whiskey is expanding throughout Texas and into Oklahoma. So good for them. But right now, here in Fort Worth, hometown, uh, it's I don't have any trouble finding this at all. So I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 for price, value, and availability. You are going to pay a little bit more for those craft whiskeys, and if you want to support a local business, then I think it's worth the extra money. Next question: neat or mix? I don't do mixed drinks, and so I'm really not a good judge of that. But I can say that at 83 proof, a little bit thin, not much of a burn at all, that this probably should be a neat drink. But again, I drink almost all my whiskeys neat. At the Blackland Bar, I've heard that they actually are quite famous for their cocktails. That's a first-class cocktail bar. I do hope to go visit someday, but then I'll try a cocktail, I guess. But for right now, I'm going to say that this rye is magnificent, neat. Doesn't need ice, doesn't need water. I mean, this has just got all flavor all day, though a little bit on the weak side. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 for being neat or mixer. And the final category is bonus points. Because this is local to me, and I really think the owner, Mr. Kiprios, is onto something using Triticale and his modern computerized distilling, I believe in this product, so I'm giving it a full 5 points. This gives me a total point value of 73, which is 1 point higher than I rated their bourbon. A letter grade of a B-. Recommend, if you like rye whiskey but are a bit shy of the burn or the strong rye spice, peppery thing, that sometimes goes with rye, usually goes with rye, then this one may be up your alley because it's pretty mild, but with full flavor. If you want to explore Texas whiskeys, you've got to put this one on your list. If you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you really ought to try this. Again, this is the second bottle of this whiskey in 2 years that I've had, so I definitely go back for more. Well, that's it for now with Stab the Dragon and Blackland Rye Whiskey. So have a good evening.